It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
That sentence, I mean, it's just iconic, isn't it? It might be the most famous opening line in all of English literature.
It really is. The moment you hear it, you know exactly where you are. But, before we get into the story itself, I think we need to pause on just this one sentence.
Okay.
Because if you're learning English, this sentence, it feels like a trap. It's stated like a fact, like it's a law of nature or
Yeah,
something.
right. Like gravity. Rich man needs wife. Simple.
Exactly. But is it actually true? I mean, really, does every rich single guy in the world automatically want a wife?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or, I guess in this case, the 10,000-a-year question.
All right, because when I read it, I don't hear a fact. I hear a bit of a joke, a bit of sarcasm.
You're spot on. That's Jane Austen's genius right there in the first 30 words.
Is she making fun of the rich guys? Or maybe. Is she making fun of the society, the mothers who are all desperately trying to catch one?
She absolutely is. And that little bit of irony, that gap between what everyone says is true and what's actually true, that sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about.
Welcome to Hello English. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a giant, a really beautiful, romantic, and honestly, a very complicated giant of a story.
And I'm here to help you navigate it all. We're going to break down the language, the hidden social rules, and all the vocabulary that makes this story so timeless.
Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, oh no, a literature class.
High school flashbacks.
Totally. You're thinking it's going to be boring. But I want to make a promise right now. This is not a boring literature class. Our goal for this deep dive is to help you learn natural English through a story that is just, well, it's really juicy.
It is. It's basically the original reality TV show. It's got all the drama.
It has everything. It has love, it has huge amounts of money on the line, people making terrible mistakes, and my personal favorite, some of the most embarrassing family members you will ever read about.
All things that are, completely relatable no matter what century you're living in.
We are, of course, talking about Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It came out way back in 1813.
Over 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Hard to even wrap your head around that.
It is, but I swear, if you just take away the horse-drawn carriages and the big dresses, it feels so incredibly modern. And here's a little reassurance before we really jump in. If you have never, ever read this book, that's okay.
It's more than okay. In fact, it might even be better because you get to hear all the twists and turns for the first time with us.
We're going to explain the plot in really simple terms so anyone can follow along. And we're going to pull out vocabulary that you can actually use because, believe it or not, Mr. Darcy can teach you a thing or two about your next business email.
He really can. We're not just, analyzing a classic book. We're using it as a tool to help you sharpen your English.
Yeah.
So, where do we begin?
Let's start with the basics. Segment 1. Understanding the story. We have to understand the world these characters live in or nothing else makes sense. So we're in England, early 19th century. This is called the Regency era. Can you paint a picture of that for us? What does it look like?
Okay, so for everyone listening, I want you to just erase the modern world from your mind. No smartphones, no skyscrapers, no cars.
No internet. That's a big one.
A huge one. Think of big, grand country houses set in these beautiful, rolling green hills. And the main way to get around is by horse and carriage.
So if a guy ghosts you in 1813, he is really, truly gone. You can't just check his Instagram to see where he is.
Exactly. Your communication options are limited. You can write a letter, which will take days to arrive.
Yeah.
You can physically walk over to their house for a visit. Or, and this is the most important one, you meet them at a ball.
A ball. It sounds so formal and fancy.
It is, but it's really just a big dance party, a very structured dance party. But it's also the main social event. It's the only place where young, unmarried men and women can actually talk and, even touch hands while dancing. It's the entire social marketplace.
It's where all the deals are made.
It's where relationships start and where they can end very publicly.
Okay, so into this world, we meet our main family, the Bennets. And this is where the central problem of the entire story lives.
The Bennet family. What a group.
We have Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, and they have 5 daughters.
5. No sons. 5 daughters. Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia.
And in 1813, for a family like theirs, having 5 daughters and 0 sons is not just an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen.
It is a full-blown financial crisis.
Yeah.
And to understand why, we have to talk about money. The family lives in a nice house called Longbourn. They have land, they have servants, they're comfortable.
They're what we'd call upper middle class, sort of.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah.
But there's a huge legal problem hanging over their heads. A dark cloud.
This is the part that I think confuses everyone, even native speakers sometimes. It's this word, entailment.
Yes. The Longbourn estate is entailed.
Let's unpack that because this one word drives the entire plot. What does it mean for a property to be entailed?
In the simplest terms, it's a legal rule that says the property can only be passed down to a male heir. It has to follow the male line.
So even though Mr. Bennet has 5 children...
Because they're all girls, they can't inherit the main property. When Mr. Bennet dies, the house, the land, and the income from that land, it all goes to the next man in the family tree.
Which is not a son. So who is it?
It's a distant cousin he's barely met, a man named Mr. Collins.
Okay, let me just get this straight. The moment their father dies, these 5 girls and their mother, they get kicked out of their own home.
That's it. They lose everything. They'll have a very, very small amount of money from their mother's savings, but they will be homeless, they'll lose their social standing, they'll be poor.
That is terrifying. I mean, it's not just unfair, it's actively dangerous for them.
It is. So now think about Mrs. Bennet. When you first meet her in the book, she seems so silly. She's loud, she's gossipy. Her only topic of conversation is getting her daughters married.
She's always complaining about her poor nerves. She comes across as just this really annoying, obsessive matchmaker.
She is all of those things. But when you understand the entailment, you realize her motivation isn't just social climbing. It's pure, desperate survival.
She has to get her daughters married. Not just for a fancy wedding, but so they have a roof over their heads when their father is gone.
She needs them to marry men with money because it is, quite literally, their only path to security.
That completely changes how you see her. She's not just a gold digger. She's a mother in a panic.
Right. And her panic is what fuels that truth, universally acknowledged. She needs that single man in possession of a good fortune.
And as luck would have it, one appears. This is the event that kicks off the whole story. A very rich, very single young man named Mr. Bingley rents the biggest mansion in the neighborhood, Netherfield Park.
And news travels fast in a small town. Mrs. Bennet hears about him, and she immediately goes into overdrive.
This leads us to the big party, the ball, where we get what modern romantic comedies call the meet-cute.
Or, in this case, we get 2 meetings.
Oh.
One is a meet-cute, and the other is more of a meet-hate.
A meet-hate. I love that. Okay, so let's track the 2 main couples. First, the easy one, the meet-cute.
That would be the eldest Bennet daughter, Jane. Jane is, the classic beauty of the family. She's gentle, she's kind. She never thinks a bad thought about anyone.
She's almost too perfect,
Yes.
Like a Disney princess before they decided to give them personalities.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So Jane meets the new guy, Mr. Bingley, at the ball, and it's instant. Sparks fly.
What's he like?
He's the total opposite of what you might expect from a rich guy. He's not snobby at all. He's friendly. He's smiling. He's talking to everyone. He's described as being very well-mannered.
And he's clearly into Jane. He dances with her twice.
Which was a huge deal back then. A public signal of serious interest. So everyone sees it. They look great together. It's perfect.
It's easy. It's simple. But a simple, easy romance does not make for a 400-page novel.
Exactly. We need conflict. And that conflict arrives in the form of the second couple.
This is Elizabeth Bennet, our main character. She's the second sister. And she meets Mr. Bingley's best friend, Mr. Darcy.
Mr. Darcy. The name everyone knows. Even if you've never read the book, you've probably heard of Mr. Darcy.
You have. But at the beginning of this story, he is not the romantic hero. He is, for all intents and purposes, the villain.
He really is. So let's set the scene. Darcy is with Bingley at this party. He's even richer than Bingley. He's an aristocrat, owns this massive estate called Pemberley. But his behavior...
It's terrible. While Bingley is charming everyone, Darcy just stands in a corner with a scowl on his face. He refuses to be introduced to anyone. He won't dance.
He's described as haughty and aloof. Let's pause on aloof for a second. It's a great word.
Yeah, what does aloof really mean?
It means you're being distant, maybe a bit cool and unfriendly. You're intentionally keeping yourself separate from the group as if you're too good for them.
So he's just standing there, silently judging everyone in the room.
Pretty much. And then the disaster happens, the moment that changes everything.
Bingley comes over to him, trying to get him to enjoy the party. He says something like, "Come on, Darcy, you have to dance. Look, there's Jane Bennet's sister, Elizabeth. She's very pretty. Go ask her."
And Darcy, not realizing Elizabeth is close enough to hear every word, says the most brutal thing.
He says, "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me.
Ouch. Tolerable.
It's devastating. It's like saying, she's okay, I guess. A 5 out of 10. This is what we call a snub.
A snub is when you deliberately insult or ignore someone, and this one is a major social blunder.
And Elizabeth, our hero, she's smart, she's funny, and she has a lot of pride herself. She overhears this, and she makes a decision on the spot.
She decides, okay, Mr. Darcy is the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world. I hate him.
And that's our central conflict. She writes him off completely.
And I think most of us would, right? If you heard someone say that about you, you'd be done with them forever.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the brilliant part, the great irony of the story. While Elizabeth is spending the next few chapters hating his guts and making fun of him with her friends,
He starts to change his mind.
he does. He starts watching her. He notices she's intelligent, that she has a playful sense of humor. He starts to admire her fine eyes. He's actually becoming attracted to her.
But he fights it, right? He doesn't want to be.
He fights it tooth and nail because in his mind, she's a terrible match for him. Remember her family, the crazy mother, the lack of money, the low social connections. Marrying Elizabeth Bennet would be a social disaster for an aristocrat like him.
So we have this amazing tension building up. She despises him, and he's secretly and very reluctantly falling for her.
And this all comes to a head right in the middle of the book, in one of the most famous scenes. Darcy just can't fight his feelings anymore. He tracks her down, and he proposes marriage.
But it is without a doubt the worst marriage proposal in the history of literature.
It's so bad. It's almost funny how bad it is. He doesn't just say, I love you, will you marry me?
No. He basically walks in and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, I've tried not to love you, but I can't help it. I know your family is awful and you have no money, and all my friends and family will think I'm crazy, but I love you against my better judgment. So will you marry me?
He insults her entire life while asking for her hand. He's so full of pride that he genuinely expects her to be grateful.
Yeah, he thinks she should be thrilled that someone so far above her would even consider it.
And Elizabeth? Well, she doesn't just say no, she unleashes on him.
She absolutely destroys him. She calls him arrogant and conceited. She lists all the terrible things she thinks he's done, and then she delivers the final blow.
She tells him he is the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry.
And he's just stunned. He's never been rejected in his life. The whole thing is a complete catastrophe.
It is, but that's what makes the story so good. The second half of the book isn't about them just magically falling in love. It's about both of them having to realize how wrong they were.
They both have to change. They have to confront their own flaws before they can find their way back to each other.
And that is the perfect transition to our second segment. We need to really look at the title of the book, Pride and Prejudice. These aren't just two random words Austen thought sounded nice. They are the psychological roadmap for the entire story.
They're the keys to understanding the characters and the English they use.
Let's put a spotlight on them. First up, pride.
Okay, so in modern English, we often think of pride as a good thing. You might say, I take pride in my work, or I'm so proud of my daughter.
Right. It can mean self-respect, a feeling of satisfaction in your achievements. That's the positive side of pride.
But it has a dark side, too. And that's the side the book is mostly interested in. Pride can also mean arrogance. It's having such a high opinion of yourself that you look down on other people.
So in the story, who is the poster child for pride?
Oh, it's Darcy. 100%, especially in the first half of the book. His pride is all about his social status, his family's name, his immense wealth. He thinks he's better than everyone in this small country town.
His pride makes him build walls around himself. It makes him seem aloof and rude.
Exactly. So Darcy is pride. Now what about the second word? Prejudice.
This is such a great word to understand. If you break it down, you see the two parts, pre and judge. It literally means to prejudge.
To form an opinion about someone before you have the facts. To judge them based on a first impression or incomplete information.
And who in the story is guilty of prejudice?
Well, that's Elizabeth. She's our prejudiced character. She hears Darcy make that one rude comment at the party.
That not handsome enough line.
And that's it. Her mind is made up. He's a bad person, full stop. And from that moment on, everything he does, she sees through that negative filter. She's completely prejudiced against him.
But, and this is where Austen is so clever, it's not that simple, is it? It's not just Darcy is pride, Elizabeth is prejudice.
No, not at all. They both have both flaws. That's what makes them so realistic.
How so? Where do we see Darcy's prejudice?
He's prejudiced against Elizabeth's entire family because they have less money and less sophisticated manners. He prejudges them as being vulgar and unworthy.
And what about Elizabeth's pride?
Oh, she's incredibly proud of her own intelligence. She prides herself on being a good judge of character. She thinks she's too smart to be fooled.
So her pride in her own judgment actually makes her blind to the truth.
Exactly. Her pride fuels her prejudice. The two are completely linked.
You know, before we move on, we have to do a quick pronunciation check on the word prejudice because it's a really common one for learners to stumble on.
It is. I hear it mispronounced all the time. People look at the spelling, Prejudice, and they see that juice or ice at the end.
So they say something like prejudice.
Right, prejudice with a long I sound.
But that's not quite right. The correct pronunciation is softer and shorter. It's bread.
Let's break that down.
Prejudice. The stress is on the first syllable, and that I at the end is a short I sound, not a long I sound.
Prejudice. Everyone listening at home, just try saying that out loud. Prejudice.
Perfect. And while we're on the subject of common mistakes, there's a big grammar trap with this word, too.
Oh, this one is like nails on a chalkboard for me. I hear it constantly. People will say, I am prejudice.
He is prejudice. Ugh. It just sounds wrong to a native speaker's ear. Why is it wrong?
Because prejudice is a noun. It's a thing. It's the idea itself. You can have prejudice. So he has a prejudice against modern art. That's correct.
But if you're describing a person who feels that way, you need to use the adjective form.
And the adjective is prejudiced, with a D on the end.
So I am prejudiced. She is a very prejudiced person.
Exactly. It's a small difference in spelling, but a huge difference in grammar. You have prejudice, the noun, but you are prejudiced, the adjective.
That's a really important distinction. And, you know, it all comes back to a core idea in the book. Fun fact, the original title wasn't even Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, that's right. It had a different working title, didn't it?
It did. It was originally called First Impressions.
Which is much more direct, I suppose. It tells you exactly what the book is about.
It does. But Pride and Prejudice is so much more powerful and more poetic. But it does leave us with a great question to think about. How often are our first impressions of people completely and totally wrong?
Almost always, I'd say. Which brings us nicely into segment 3. Let's talk about these characters as if they're real people. Because the reason this story has lasted for 2 centuries is that they feel real. They're complicated and messy.
So messy. Let's start with our heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, or Lizzie, as her family calls her.
Lizzie is just the best. She's smart, she's funny, she loves to laugh at the absurdity of the world around her, she's witty.
And she's so different from other heroines of her time. She's not quiet or submissive. She has a backbone.
She really does. What makes her so relatable, I think, for a modern audience, is that she stands up for herself. When powerful people are rude to her, like Mr. Darcy, or his terrifying aunt, Lady Catherine, she doesn't just sit there and take it, she pushes back. She uses her intelligence as a weapon.
But as we said, she's not perfect. She has a pretty significant flaw.
A huge one. She is too confident in her own judgment. She thinks she's the smartest person in any room and that she can't be wrong.
And this leads her to make a huge mistake with another character, Mr. Wickham.
Ah, yes. The charming Mr. Wickham. We'll get to him in a minute. But Elizabeth meets him, and because he's handsome and tells her a sad story, she instantly believes every word he says.
She trusts the charming guy and distrusts the awkward, rude guy. It's a very human mistake to make.
It's classic confirmation bias. Once she decides Darcy is the villain, she looks for any evidence to support that theory, and she ignores anything that contradicts it.
So here's a question for you and for everyone listening. Have you ever done that? Judged someone too quickly and just been completely wrong about them?
I think we all have. Maybe it was a new boss who seemed really tough, but turned out to be a great mentor. That is the journey Elizabeth Bennet goes on.
Okay, let's flip the coin and talk about Mr. Darcy. His full name is Fitzwilliam Darcy, by the way.
Very fancy. So on the surface, he's the full package. He's incredibly rich, he's handsome, he's intelligent.
Yeah.
But his social skills are a disaster.
A complete disaster. And you know, there's a really interesting modern take on Darcy. A lot of people today look back at his character and diagnose him.
How so?
They say, wait a minute, is he just an arrogant jerk? Or is he maybe just a massive introvert with a lot of social anxiety?
I love that reading of him. It makes so much sense. He's not comfortable in big crowds of strangers. He doesn't know how to make small talk. So he puts up this mask of arrogance to protect himself.
There's a scene where he actually says something like that. He admits, I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before.
Which is so relatable. I feel that way sometimes. You go to a party, you don't know anyone, and you just want to stand in the corner and look at your phone. Darcy didn't have a phone. So he just scowled.
Exactly. And the journey he goes on is about learning humility. That first horrible proposal is a huge wake-up call for him. He realizes that being rich and high status doesn't automatically make him a good person or entitle him to whatever he wants.
And we see his true character later in the story. The Bennett family gets into a huge public scandal because of the youngest sister, Lydia. It's a mess.
A total disaster that could ruin the reputation of all the sisters forever.
And Darcy, secretly, steps in to fix it.
Mm.
He uses his own time and a huge amount of his own money to track Lydia down and solve the problem. But here's the most important part. He doesn't tell anyone.
He does it anonymously. He doesn't want credit. He doesn't do it so Elizabeth will be grateful and fall in love with him. He does it because it's the right thing to do and because he cares about her.
That's how you know his change is real. He's learned to act out of integrity, not pride.
He really is the blueprint for that enemies to lovers hero we see in so many books and movies today. The grumpy, misunderstood guy who's actually a hero on the inside.
But every hero needs a real villain. And the villain in this story is so well done because he's not obvious. Let's talk about George Wickham.
Wickham is so dangerous because on the outside, he's perfect. He's an officer in the militia, he's got a great uniform, he's incredibly handsome.
And he's so charming, he knows exactly what to say. He listens to Elizabeth, he validates her feelings about Darcy. He's the guy at the party who everyone loves instantly.
But underneath that charming surface, he's rotten to the core. He's a compulsive liar and a gambler who is deeply in debt.
And he has a history of preying on vulnerable young women for their money. He tried to elope with Darcy's 15-year-old sister to get her inheritance.
And then he ends up running away with Lydia Bennett, who's only 16, with no intention of marrying her. He's a true predator.
The lesson with Wickham is so important. Sometimes the people with the best manners are actually the worst people. And sometimes the people with bad manners, like Darcy at the beginning, are actually good.
You can't just judge a book by its cover, or, in this case, a man by his charming smile.
Speaking of manners and social graces, let's move into segment 4 and look at some more everyday vocabulary from the book that you can still use today.
Yes, let's pull out some useful words. The first one is a word we've already used to describe Darcy and another character, awkward.
Awkward. Such a useful English word. It describes a feeling of embarrassment or social clumsiness, a situation that is just uncomfortable.
And the king of awkward in this book is Mr. Collins, the cousin who's going to inherit the house.
Oh, Mr. Collins, he is so cringeworthy. He tries so hard to be formal and polite that he just makes everyone uncomfortable. His proposal to Elizabeth is a masterclass in secondhand embarrassment. You feel embarrassed for him.
Let's do a quick pronunciation check on this one, too. I sometimes hear learners add an extra syllable. They'll say something like aquaword.
Right, breaking it into 3 parts.
But it's really just 2 syllables.
Yeah, Toby Kirar. Awkward.
That silence was really awkward. He told an awkward joke. Very useful.
Okay, next phrase. We've talked about the original title. First impression.
This one is pretty straightforward. It's the initial idea or feeling you get about someone or something the very first time you encounter them.
It's used all the time, especially in professional contexts. It's important to make a good first impression in a job interview.
Or you could say, my first impression of the city was that it was very crowded.
And there's a great idiom that goes with it. You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
That's a good one to remember. Okay, how about our next one? It's a phrasal verb. To look down on.
To look down on someone means you think you're better than them. It implies a sense of superiority and condescension.
In the book, Mr. Bingley's sisters, Caroline and Louisa, are masters of this. They are rich and very snobby, and they definitely look down on the Bennett family. They look down on them because they don't have as much money, and because their relatives are in trade, they actually have jobs, which was seen as inferior by the upper classes.
It's a very negative phrase. You could say, it's wrong to look down on people just because they have a different background.
Definitely. And for our last one, let's do a positive one. Well-mannered.
This is a lovely compliment. It just means someone is polite, has good social graces, and knows how to behave properly in different situations.
Jane Bennet is always described as being well-mannered. Mr. Bingley is very well-mannered. It means they make other people feel comfortable.
A great quality to have. Okay, let's zoom out again for segment 5 and dig a little deeper into the cultural context. We've said money is important, but we need to really stress why marriage was the only career path for women like the Bennett sisters.
It's a reality that's hard for many of us to truly grasp today. For women of the gentry, the landowning class, working for money was simply not an option.
It was considered shameful, right? It would bring disgrace on the family.
Exactly. You couldn't be a doctor, a lawyer, a shop owner.
Mhm.
The only, and I mean only, paid position that was even remotely acceptable was to be a governess.
A governess. So
Yeah.
basically a live-in tutor for a rich family's children.
Yes. And it was a terrible position to be in. You weren't part of the family, but you also weren't one of the servants. You were stuck in this lonely, isolated social limbo.
So these women were raised to be decorative and accomplished, to sing, play the piano, draw, but they had zero practical skills to support themselves.
None. They were completely dependent, first on their fathers and then, hopefully, on a husband. If you didn't marry and your father died, your future was bleak. You'd have to live on the charity of a brother or some other male relative.
You'd become a permanent and probably unwelcome houseguest.
So Mrs. Bennet's obsession, her business, as she calls it, of getting her daughters married, it's a life or death mission.
It really is. And this brings us to one of the most interesting and tragic characters in the book, Charlotte Lucas.
Charlotte is Elizabeth's best friend. She's smart, she's sensible, but she's 27 years old.
Which back then was practically on the shelf. She was considered an old maid.
It's heartbreaking to think about. So when the awful Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth and Elizabeth vehemently refuses.
Charlotte sees her chance, and she takes it. She strategically gets his attention, and when he proposes to her, she accepts immediately.
And Elizabeth is horrified. She can't believe her friend would marry this ridiculous man she doesn't love or even respect.
But Charlotte lays out the cold, hard reality for her. She says, I am not romantic, you know. I ask only a comfortable home. For her, marriage is not about love. It is a business transaction. It is about security.
She chooses a comfortable prison over an uncertain freedom. It's a really pragmatic, if sad, choice.
And it makes Elizabeth's position seem even more rebellious. By turning down not one, but two proposals that would have secured her future from Collins and from Darcy, she is taking a massive gamble.
She's basically saying, I would rather risk poverty and homelessness than be in a marriage without love and respect. That was an incredibly radical idea for a woman in her position.
And she faces so much pressure to conform. Which brings us to the ultimate symbol of social pressure, Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Darcy's aunt. She is one of the great literary bullies. She is a rich, powerful, arrogant aristocrat who thinks she has the right to control everyone's lives.
There's a legendary scene near the end of the book where she finds out there's a rumor that her nephew Darcy might marry Elizabeth. And she loses her mind.
She gets in her carriage and travels for hours just to confront Elizabeth and put a stop to it. She basically storms into the Bennet's house.
And she tells Elizabeth in no uncertain terms that she is not allowed to marry Darcy. She says Elizabeth is from an inferior family, that she is of a lower class. She says a marriage between them would pollute the shades of Pemberley.
What a line. She's essentially calling her and her family trash that will dirty up his fancy estate.
But Elizabeth doesn't back down. She doesn't cry or apologize. She stands up to this terrifying woman and argues with her point for point. She defends her own worth. It's an incredible moment of strength.
It's the ultimate showdown between individual character and rigid social hierarchy. And Elizabeth wins.
It's fantastic. Okay, let's move into our next segment, segment 6, where we can offer some practical advice for you, the listener, on how to actually use this story to improve your English.
Yes, because we know that picking up a 200-year-old novel can be intimidating. The language is different. So we have a tip that might feel like cheating, but I promise it's not.
Watch the movie or the TV series.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's one of the best learning tools you can use.
I 100% agree. There's a very famous 1995 BBC series starring Colin Firth and a beautiful 2005 movie with Keira Knightley. Watching one of these is an amazing way to practice your listening skills.
Why do you think it's so much more effective than just reading the book on its own?
Because language is so much more than just words on a page. When you watch the adaptation, you get context. You see the actors' facial expressions, you hear the tone of their voice. This is sarcastic, angry, affectionate.
So if a character says a complicated, old-fashioned sentence, you can understand the emotional meaning from their performance.
Exactly. It helps you decode the language. You see the beautiful houses, the costumes. The whole world comes to life, which makes the story much easier to follow.
Now, speaking of the language, we should probably include a small word of warning.
A very important warning. Jane Austen's English is beautiful and brilliant, but it is over 200 years old. Do not, under any circumstances, try to talk like Mr. Darcy in your daily life.
Please don't. You will sound like you've just stepped out of a time machine or like a very strange robot.
Right. For instance, in that first proposal, Darcy says, "You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you."
Ardently. It's a wonderful word. It means with great passion. But if you said that to someone you were asking out today, they'd probably be a little confused.
There might be. A modern English speaker would just say something more direct, like, "I'm so in love with you," or "I'm crazy about you."
So the lesson is, understand and appreciate the classic language. But for your own speaking, stick to modern, natural English.
And one final piece of encouragement. It is completely normal to find the book challenging at first. The sentences are longer than we're used to, the vocabulary is more complex.
Don't feel like you have to understand every single word. Try to focus on the bigger picture. Get the gist of the scene. Who is happy? Who is angry? What's the main point?
Progress, not perfection. Every time you struggle with a sentence and figure it out, your English brain is getting stronger. Mistakes are proof that you are learning.
Absolutely. Okay, for our final segment, segment 7, let's talk about why we are still so obsessed with this story. Why are we doing a deep dive on a book from 1813 and not, say, 2023?
I think it's because the technology and the clothes have changed, but people haven't. The themes are just as relevant today as they were then.
Like what? What are some of those universal themes?
Well, dealing with an embarrassing family, I think everyone can relate to that on some level. Or making a terrible first impression. Or misjudging someone completely. And of course, falling in love when you least expect it with the person you thought you hated.
These are just fundamental parts of the human experience. And our pop culture knows it. It's constantly retelling this story in new ways.
The most famous example is probably Bridget Jones's Diary. The book and the movie are a direct, intentional modern version of Pride and Prejudice.
They don't even hide it. The main love interest is a handsome, socially awkward human rights lawyer named Mark Darcy.
And he even has a rival who's a charming, handsome liar named Daniel Cleaver, who is the Wickham character. It's the same story, just with apartments in London instead of estates in the country.
And there's so many other crazier adaptations. There's the book Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the original story, but with a zombie apocalypse happening in the background. It's surprisingly fun.
And for a really clever modern take, people should look up the Lizzie Bennet Diaries on YouTube. It retold the entire story through a series of vlogs from Lizzie's bedroom. It was brilliant.
It just proves how strong the original characters and plot are. They can work in any setting.
And we can't talk about modern appeal without mentioning the Colin Firth effect.
Ah, yes. The lake scene.
The lake scene. In that 1995 BBC series, they added a scene that is not in the book, where Mr. Darcy, hot and bothered, takes a spontaneous swim in a lake on his property.
And he walks out of the water in a white shirt that is completely see-through, and he bumps right into Elizabeth.
That one scene became this huge cultural moment. It cemented Colin Firth as the definitive Mr. Darcy for a whole generation, and probably sold 1 million extra copies of the book.
It definitely added a modern layer of smoldering romance that the book only hints at.
So, to wrap things up today, we've covered a lot of ground. We broke down the plot, the entailment, the balls, the terrible proposals.
We looked at the key vocabulary: pride, prejudice, awkward, first impressions. And we saw how Elizabeth and Darcy weren't just fighting society, they had to fight their own internal flaws to find happiness.
We learned the important lesson of not judging by appearances, whether it's the handsome villain Wickham or the grumpy hero Darcy.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, a quote from the book. It's actually from Mary Bennet, the boring, bookish sister who nobody really listens to.
She occasionally says something smart.
She does. At one point she says, "Vanity and pride are different things. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us."
That's a really sharp distinction.
It is. It makes you think. Are your actions based on your own internal values, your pride, or are they based on how you want other people to see you, your vanity? It's a very modern question to think about.
I hope you all enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Pride and Prejudice, and hopefully you feel a little more confident about tackling a classic story in English.
And if you did enjoy it, please make sure to check out the other videos on our channel. We have more stories, more language tips, and more deep dives to help you on your English learning journey.
Thanks so much for listening. Happy learning.